The briefing room at MI6 headquarters was deliberately unremarkable gray walls, utilitarian furniture, and lighting designed to reveal nothing about the people who occupied it. James Blackwell sat across from his handler, Victoria Sterling, and watched her arrange photographs on the table with the precise movements of someone who'd delivered hundreds of death sentences disguised as mission briefings. "Her name is Anastasia Volkov," Victoria said, sliding the first photo forward. Age 29, born in Moscow, educated at Cambridge, speaks 7 languages fluently. On paper, she's a cultural attaché at the Russian embassy. In reality, she's SVR, Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, and one of their best. James studied the photograph. The woman looking back at him was striking, sharp cheekbones, ice blue eyes that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it, dark hair pulled back in a severe style that somehow made her more beautiful rather than less. She wore diplomatic neutrality like armor, revealing nothing. "What's her operational focus?" James asked, his voice professionally detached, despite the way something in those photographed eyes made his pulse quicken. "She runs a network of assets throughout Western Europe, specializing in technology and defense intelligence. Over the past 18 months, she's been responsible for at least 6 major breaches of NATO classified systems." Victoria slid forward more photos, documents, intercepted communications, surveillance images. "She's cost us 3 agents, compromised to ongoing operations, and represents one of the most significant intelligence threats currently operating in London, and you want me to neutralize her?" It wasn't a question. James had been MI6's problem solver for 8 years. When diplomacy failed and direct action was required, they called him. "We want you to turn her," Victoria corrected. "Anastasia Volkov is too valuable to eliminate. Her network, her access, her knowledge of SVR operations. If we could flip her, make her work for us instead of against us, it would be the intelligence coup of the decade." James leaned back, processing, turning a trained SVR operative who's been successfully running operations for years. "That's not an assignment, Victoria. That's a fantasy, which is why we're sending our best." Victoria pulled out another file, thicker than the first. "We've been building a legend for you. Tech entrepreneur, self-made billionaire, recently relocated to London. You'll move in the same circles as Volkov, attend the same events, create opportunities for natural contact. How long do I have?" 3 months to make initial contact and establish a relationship. 6 months total to complete the turn or determine it's impossible. Victoria's expression was carefully neutral. "James, I need to be clear about something. Anastasia Volkov is not just skilled, she's brilliant. She's survived this long because she's better at reading people than almost anyone we've ever encountered. If she suspects for 1 second that you're not who you claim to be, I'll be dead or worse," James finished. "I understand the risks, do you?" Victoria leaned forward, and for the first time, James saw genuine concern behind her professional mask. "This isn't like your other operations. You'll be living a complete fabrication, day and night, for months. You'll be trying to seduce a woman trained to resist exactly that kind of manipulation. And if you succeed, you actually manage to turn her, you'll be betraying whatever relationship you've built. That's the job," James said flatly. "Yes, but this job requires you to make someone fall in love with you so thoroughly that they'll betray everything they believe in. It requires emotional manipulation of the highest order." Victoria held his gaze. "Are you prepared to do that?" James thought about the question. He'd killed people, stolen secrets, destroyed lives in service to his country. Emotional manipulation should have been simple by comparison. But something about Anastasia Volkov's photographed eyes made him uncertain in a way he hadn't been in years. "I'm prepared," he said. Victoria nodded, though doubt flickered in her expression. "Then welcome to Operation Heartbreak. Your new life starts tomorrow." 3 weeks later, James, now known as Alexander Cross, tech entrepreneur and venture capitalist, stood in the ballroom of a Mayfair hotel at a charity gala for international development. His legend was perfect. Real companies, real investments, real money that had been carefully laundered through intelligence budgets to create an unassailable cover. He'd been attending events like this for 2 weeks, carefully positioning himself in Anastasia Volkov's orbit without making direct contact. Let her notice him first. Let her curiosity do the work. "Mr. Cross," a woman's voice, accented but perfectly controlled. "I don't believe we've been introduced." James turned, and for the first time, saw Anastasia Volkov in person rather than in photographs. The images hadn't done her justice. They'd captured her beauty, but missed the intelligence that radiated from her like heat, the way she held herself with perfect balance between approachability and distance. Alexander Cross, he said, extending his hand with a smile calibrated to be charming but not aggressive. And you have me at a disadvantage. You know my name, but I don't know yours. Anastasia Volkov. Her handshake was firm, professional, lasting exactly the appropriate amount of time. I work at the Russian embassy. Cultural affairs. Cultural affairs. James let a hint of skepticism color his tone, not enough to be insulting, just enough to suggest he saw through the cover story. That must be fascinating work. Something flickered in her amusement maybe, or appreciation for the subtle challenge. It has its moments, though I suspect not as fascinating as venture capital and technology startups. Your investments in AI research have been quite bold. So she'd researched him. Good. That meant his legend was holding, and she'd taken the bait. Bold, or reckless, depending on who you ask, James replied. I believe artificial intelligence will reshape the world in the next decade. I'd rather be part of that transformation than left behind by it. Transformation, Anastasia repeated the word thoughtfully. An interesting choice of words. Transformation implies complete change, not just evolution. You think the changes will be that dramatic? I think technology has always driven geopolitical change. The printing press, the telegraph, nuclear weapons each fundamentally altered the balance of power. James gestured subtly at the room around them, full of diplomats and politicians. AI will do the same. The question is whether we shape that change or are shaped by it. A philosophical entrepreneur. How refreshing. Anastasia's smile was small but genuine. Most of the tech people I meet care only about profit margins and market disruption. Profit margins pay for the philosophy, James said, making her laugh, a real laugh, spontaneous and warm. But I'm curious, why does a cultural attach care about AI and geopolitics? Because culture is geopolitics, Anastasia replied smoothly. How we communicate, what we value, what stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Technology changes all of that. Understanding the technology means understanding the culture it creates. James found himself genuinely impressed. It was a perfect deflection, using her cover story to explain interest in subjects far beyond cultural affairs. If he hadn't known she was SVR, he might have believed it. That's a sophisticated perspective, he said. I'd love to continue this conversation somewhere quieter. Would you like to get a drink away from the crowd? Anastasia hesitated, and James saw her calculating, weighing opportunity against risk, deciding whether Alexander Cross was someone worth investing time in. One drink, she said finally, but I choose the location, of course. She led him to a smaller bar area, away from the main ballroom, but still public enough to be safe. They talked for an hour about technology, culture, politics, dancing around deeper subjects while learning each other's rhythms. James found himself enjoying it more than he should. Anastasia was brilliant, witty, capable of matching him intellectually on subjects most people couldn't even follow. She was also careful, never revealing more than necessary, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. You're very good at this, James said eventually. At what? Conversation without revelation. We've been talking for an hour, and I know almost nothing about you personally. Anastasia's smile was knowing. Perhaps I'm just a private person. Or perhaps you're equally skilled at deflection, Mr. Cross. You've told me about your business philosophy, your views on technology, your opinions on everything from AI ethics to international relations, but I don't know if you have family, what you do for fun, or whether Alexander Cross is who you really are. The last statement landed with deliberate weight. James felt his pulse quicken. Was she probing, or just making conversation? Alexander Cross is who I am now, he said, choosing truth disguised as metaphor. The past is less interesting than the future. How very American of you. Russians never forget the past, it's always with us, shaping who we become. She finished her drink, set down the glass. Thank you for an intellectually stimulating conversation, Mr. Cross. It's been a rare pleasure. The pleasure was mine. Perhaps we could do this again. Dinner, maybe, somewhere with less diplomatic small talk. Anastasia studied him for a long moment, and James had the unsettling feeling she was seeing more than he wanted to reveal. Perhaps, she said finally, if our paths cross again. She left, and James watched her go, trying to analyze the encounter objectively. He'd made contact, established himself as interesting and intellectually compatible, created the foundation for future interactions. It had been a successful first engagement. So why did he feel like he'd just played chess against someone who was 3 moves ahead of him? Over the following weeks, James and Anastasia's paths crossed with increasing frequency. Sometimes by designs made sure to attend events where she'd be present. Sometimes apparently by accident running into each other at museums, cafes, cultural events. Each encounter deepened their connection. They debated philosophy over coffee, argued about literature at gallery openings, discovered shared tastes in music and surprising disagreements about art. Anastasia challenged him, intellectually, in ways no one had in years, forcing him to be sharper, more thoughtful, more present than any cover identity had ever required. And somewhere in those weeks, the lines began to blur. James told himself it was part of the operation. Getting close to Anastasia meant understanding her, and understanding her meant genuinely engaging with who she was. The fact that he looked forward to their conversations, that he found himself thinking about her observations days later, that he caught himself smiling at memories of her laugh, all of that was just deep cover, except it didn't feel like deep cover. "You're compromised," Victoria said flatly during one of their covert debriefs. They met in a safe house in South London, James arriving after ensuring he wasn't followed. "I can hear it in your voice when you talk about her. I'm establishing a deep emotional connection," James corrected. "That's the assignment. The assignment is to manipulate her emotions, not develop your own." Victoria pulled up surveillance photos on her laptop, images of James and Anastasia at various locations, looking far too comfortable together. "You're spending time with her beyond what's operationally necessary, having conversations that serve no intelligence purpose. You're not running an operation anymore, James. You're dating her. I'm building trust. Real trust takes time. Real trust." Victoria's voice sharpened. "There's nothing real about this, James. She's SVR, you're MI6. Everything between you is a lie wrapped in deception. The moment you forget that is the moment this operation becomes a disaster." James knew she was right. He knew every word Anastasia said to him was carefully calculated, every smile a tactic, every moment of apparent vulnerability a strategic choice. She was running her own operation, trying to figure out who Alexander Cross really was and whether he could be useful to Russian intelligence. Except sometimes in unguarded moments when she thought he wasn't looking, he saw something that seemed genuine. A flash of loneliness, of exhaustion from maintaining constant deception, of wanting something real in a life built entirely on lies. Or maybe he was just seeing what he wanted to see. "I'm in control," James said. "The operation is progressing exactly as planned. Then progress it faster. We're 2 months in. It's time to escalate. Rushing will spook her. She's too smart. She's also too valuable to lose. If you can't turn her in the next month, we'll need to consider other options." Victoria's expression was grim. Permanent options. James felt something cold settle in his chest. "You want me to seduce her and then kill her if she won't flip? I want you to complete your mission, however that needs to happen." Victoria closed her laptop. "This isn't personal, James. It's never personal. Remember that." After the debriefing, James drove through London's night streets, his mind churning. Victoria was right, it wasn't personal. It couldn't be personal. Anastasia Volkov was the enemy, a threat to national security, someone who'd cost British agents their lives. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her laughing at something he'd said, saw the way her eyes softened when she talked about books she loved, saw the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. He was compromised, and he had no idea what to do about it. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday evening. James had invited Anastasia to a private concerto chamber music performance at a historic venue in Westminster. He'd learned she loved classical music, particularly Russian composers, and had secured tickets through connections his cover identity would plausibly have. They sat in the intimate space as the quartet performed Shostakovich, and James watched Anastasia's face as the music washed over her. All her careful control fell away, replaced by raw emotion, joy, sorrow, longing, all flickering across her features. When it ended, she had tears in her eyes. "That was ... double quotes," she trailed off, unable to finish. "Beautiful," James supplied. "Heartbreaking." She smiled through the tears. "Shostakovich wrote that piece during the war. Everything he loved was being destroyed, and all he could do was capture that destruction in music. That's what makes it so powerful. It's art, born from absolute helplessness. They walked afterward, neither wanting the evening to end. London's rain had softened to mist, and the city glowed with reflected light. They talked about music, about art, about the ways people tried to create meaning in a world that often seemed meaningless. "Can I tell you something?" Anastasia said suddenly. They'd stopped in front of the Thames, watching the river flow past with ancient indifference. "Something true." James's heart rate increased. This was it, the moment of vulnerability he'd been working toward. "Of course, I'm tired." The words came out like a confession. "I'm tired of diplomatic receptions where everyone lies to each other with perfect politeness. I'm tired of conversations that mean nothing, of relationships that are all surface and no substance. I'm tired of being alone in rooms full of people." She turned to face him, and in the dim light, James saw exhaustion and hope warring in her expression. "But when I'm with you, I don't feel alone. I don't know why. We barely know each other, and I'm sure you have secrets just like everyone else, but something about you feels real. Does that make sense?" James knew what he should do. This was the opening, the moment to deepen the emotional connection, to make her trust him completely, to begin the process of turning her. Instead, he found himself saying, "It makes perfect sense, because I feel the same way," and God help him, it was true. Anastasia stepped closer, and James could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive. "I shouldn't trust you. My training, my instincts, everything I know about people says I shouldn't let anyone this close." "Then why do you?" "Because I'm tired of being safe. Because safety means being alone, and I don't want to be alone anymore." She looked up at him, and James saw her defenses crumbling. "Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me you feel this too." James knew this was manipulation. Knew she was testing him, pushing to see if he'd reveal something. But he also knew that sometimes the truth served better than any lie. "You're not crazy," he said, his hand coming up to cup her face. "I feel it too. More than I should. More than is wise. Wisdom is overrated," Anastasia breathed, and then she was kissing him. The kiss was desperate and tender, born of loneliness and longing and the strange connection they'd built on foundations of mutual deception. James kissed her back, one hand in her hair, the other pulling her closer, and tried not to think about how every moment of this was a betrayal of his mission, of her trust, of whatever fragile truth existed between the layers of lies. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Anastasia rested her forehead against his. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "I know. We barely know each other. I know. I'm going to fall in love with you, and it's going to destroy me." James felt something crack in his chest. "Then we'll be destroyed together." They went back to his apartment, a luxury flat in Knightsbridge that was part of his cover but felt more real in that moment than anything had in years. They made love with an intensity that surprised them both, as if they were trying to bridge the distance between who they pretended to be and who they really were. Afterward, as Anastasia slept against his chest, James stared at the ceiling and tried to calculate the damage. He was supposed to be turning her, not falling for her, supposed to be maintaining operational control, not losing himself in the very connection he'd been ordered to create. But when she shifted in her sleep, murmuring something in Russian, and he automatically pulled her closer, James realized the truth he'd been avoiding. He wasn't turning Anastasia Volkov, she was turning him. The next 6 weeks were the happiest and most terrible of James's life. With Anastasia, he felt more himself than he had in years of living under false identities. They spent every moment they could together, stolen afternoons, long evenings, entire weekends where they'd shut out the world and pretend they were just two people falling in love rather than two spies lying to each other. But the lies were always there, poisoning everything. James continued his debriefings with Victoria, though he found himself editing what he reported. He confirmed that he and Anastasia were in a relationship. He reported on their conversations, carefully leaving out the moments that felt too personal to share. He maintained the fiction that he was in control, working toward turning her, making progress. It was all lies, because the truth was that James Blackwell, MI6's best operative, had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with the enemy. He knew it was wrong, knew it was compromising the mission, betraying his country, violating every principle he'd built his career on. But when Anastasia smiled at him over morning coffee, when she curled against him at night and whispered that she'd never felt this safe with anyone, When she looked at him like he was the only real thing in a world of illusions, he couldn't bring himself to care about the mission, and he suspected she felt the same, because Anastasia was changing too. The careful control she maintained in public would crack when they were alone, revealing someone vulnerable and yearning. She talked about her childhood in Moscow, about the pressure to succeed, about joining the SVR because it was expected but never feeling like she belonged. "They taught me to see everyone as either assets or threats," she said one night as they lay in bed, "to never let anyone truly know me, to use people and discard them when they're no longer useful." She turned to look at him, eyes serious. "But I don't want to do that with you. I don't want this to be another operation." "What do you want it to be?" James asked, even though he knew the answer would hurt. "Real. I want this to be real. I want you to be the person I don't have to lie to." She touched his face. "Tell me you want that too. Tell me Alexander Cross is real." James felt the walls closing in. He could tell her the truth revealed, that Alexander Cross was a fabrication, that he was MI6, that everything between them had started as manipulation. It would destroy her trust, potentially destroy her entirely. Or he could lie, maintain the cover, and pray that somehow he could find a way to make this real despite the deception it was built on. "I'm real," he said, and hated himself for not specifying which part of him he meant. "What we have is real. I promise you that." It was the truth and a lie simultaneously, the kind of statement spies specialized in. Anastasia seemed satisfied, settling back against him. But James lay awake long after she slept, feeling the weight of his deception crushing him. The crisis came 3 weeks later. James arrived at their scheduled debriefing to find Victoria with 2 other people, one he recognized as their section chief, the other a woman from technical services. "We've confirmed that Anastasia Volkov is running an operation against you," Victoria said without preamble. "She's been reporting on Alexander Cross to her SVR handlers. Detailed reports about your business, your habits, your relationships." James felt his stomach drop. "That doesn't mean we've intercepted communication suggesting she's been tasked with turning you, making you fall in love with her so completely that you'd be willing to provide intelligence to protect the relationship." Victoria's expression was sympathetic but firm. "She's been playing you from the beginning, James. Just like you've been playing her." The technical officer pulled up intercepted messages Russian but with translations. James read them with growing horror. Detailed analysis of Alexander Cross's vulnerabilities, recommendations for deepening the emotional connection, assessment of his value as a potential intelligence asset. It was everything James had been doing to her, reflected back. "She doesn't love you," the section chief said bluntly. "She's running an operation, a very successful one, apparently, because you've clearly developed feelings that have compromised your objectivity." James wanted to argue, wanted to insist that what he and Anastasia had transcended operational parameters, but how could he, when the evidence was right there, when everything she'd said could have been calculated manipulation? "We're pulling you out," Victoria said. "Effective immediately. Another officer will take over the operation with fresh perspective." "No." The word came out hard and final. "James, you pull me out now, and you burn the entire operation." "She knows something changed." "No, I was operating under false pretenses. And you'll lose any chance of turning her." James's mind raced, grasping for any way to salvage this. "Give me 2 more weeks. One final push. Either she flips or we move to elimination. You're too compromised. I know her better than anyone else could at this point. I know her patterns, her vulnerabilities, her motivations." James forced conviction into his voice. "Trust me to finish this. Trust me to do my job." The section chief and Victoria exchanged glances. "Finally, 1 week. Not 2. And James, if you can't complete the mission in that time, we will take permanent action. Am I clear?" "Perfectly." James left the debriefing feeling like he was drowning. Either Anastasia's feelings were real and she was betraying her country to be with him, or they were fake and she was betraying him to serve her country. Either way, someone was being destroyed. And James had 7 days to figure out which one it would be. James made his decision on the drive back to his apartment. It was the wrong decision, he knew that intellectually. It violated every principle of operational security, betrayed his oath, potentially compromised national security. But he was going to tell Anastasia the truth. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough that maybe they could find a way through this that didn't end in betrayal and blood. She was waiting when he arrived, curled on his sofa with a book. She looked up as he entered, and her smile faded when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" James sat beside her, taking her hands. "I need to tell you something. Something that might change everything between us." Wariness flickered in her eyes. "Alexander, my name isn't Alexander Cross." The words tumbled out before he could reconsider. "It's James Blackwell, and I'm not a tech entrepreneur." Anastasia went very still. "What are you?" "I'm MI6, British intelligence. I was assigned to get close to you, to turn you, to make you work for us, instead of against us." James watched her face carefully, saw shock and hurt, and something else was that understanding. Everything started as an operation. The charity gala, the conversations, all of it. I was supposed to manipulate your emotions, make you fall for me, use that connection to flip you. Anastasia's hands trembled in his. "Was supposed to. I fell in love with you. Somewhere between the lies and the manipulation, between the mission and the cover story. I fell in love with you, for real." James's voice cracked. "And I don't know what to do about that." Silence stretched between them. Then, Anastasia did something James didn't expect. She laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was bitter and exhausted and somehow relieved. "My name isn't really Anastasia," she said. "It's Katya. I'm SVR, obviously, but you knew that. What you didn't know is that I was assigned to assess you, potentially turn you, use Alexander Cross's business connections to access Western technology." Now, it was James's turn to be shocked. "You were running an operation on me, just like you were running one on me. We were both lying, both manipulating, both trying to use each other." Katya's eyes glistened with tears. "And we both fell in love anyway. How absurd is that? Completely absurd." James felt something between laughter and crying building in his chest. "So what do we do now?" "I don't know." She touched his face, and her hand was shaking. "My handlers expect me to turn you. Your handlers expect you to turn me. Neither of us can complete our missions without destroying the other, unless we both refuse. Then we're both traitors. They'll hunt us, both sides. We'd spend the rest of our lives running, looking over our shoulders, never safe." Katya's voice was anguished. "Is that what you want?" "I want you," James said simply. "Everything else is details. Those details include being executed for treason. Then, we make sure they can't catch us." James pulled her close, feeling her trembling against him. "I've spent 8 years being someone I'm not. Living lies, manipulating people, serving a machine that doesn't care if I live or die as long as I complete the mission. I'm done. I don't want to be that person anymore." "What do you want to be?" "Yours, just yours, if you'll have me." Katya pulled back to look at him, searching his face for deception. "You're serious? You'd actually walk away from MI6, from your career, from everything, for this, for me?" "I would, but only if you feel the same. Only if this is real for you too." "It's real," Katya whispered. "It's been real for weeks, and I've been terrified of it. Terrified of loving someone I was supposed to be using. Terrified of choosing you over everything I've built my life on." "Then choose me," James said. "Choose us. Choose the chance at something real over loyalty to organizations that only see us as tools. They'll hunt us. Let them try. We'll lose everything. We'll have each other." Katya was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I need time. To think, to plan, to figure out how we could possibly survive this." "How much time?" 24 hours. "Meet me tomorrow night at Waterloo Bridge. If I'm there, I'm choosing you. If I'm not. She stood, gathering her things. "If I'm not, then we both know where we stand." She kissed him once, desperately, like it might be the last time. Then she was gone, leaving James alone with his decision and the terrifying possibility that he'd just thrown away everything for a woman who might not choose him back. James didn't sleep that night. He spent the hours planning escape routes, new identities, locations where 2 burned intelligence officers might disappear completely. He liquidated assets, moving money into untraceable accounts. He gathered everything he'd need to vanish, and he reported nothing to Victoria. By the time he arrived at Waterloo Bridge the following evening, James had effectively committed treason. Everything he was doing assumed Katya would be there, would choose him, would be willing to burn her entire life down for a chance at something real. If she didn't show, he'd destroyed his career for nothing. The bridge was crowded with tourists and commuters, London's eternal motion providing cover. James positioned himself at their agreed meeting spot and waited. 7 p.m. came and went. No Katya. 7:15. Still nothing. James felt hope dying with each minute. She'd made her choice. She'd chosen her career, her country, her identity as a SVR officer over whatever they'd had together. He couldn't blame her. It was the logical choice, the safe choice, the choice he should have made himself. At 7:30, he started to leave. James. He turned, and there she was. Katya wore civilian clothes, jeans, a simple jacket, and carried a single backpack. No diplomatic immunity, no official cover, just a woman making an impossible choice. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said. "I needed to be sure I wasn't followed. Needed to make sure this was really what I wanted." And James hardly dared to breathe. "And I'm here." She stepped closer. "I'm burning everything. My career, my identity, my entire life. I'm choosing you over all of it. Please tell me you meant what you said." "I meant every word." James pulled her close, relief flooding through him. "I have money, documents, a plan to get us out of the country. We can disappear completely." "I have something better," Katya interrupted. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. "Complete intelligence on SVR operations in Western Europe. Every asset, every operation, every compromise. I'm giving it to you, to MI6, as insurance." James stared at the drive. "You'd betray your entire organization." "I'm betraying them anyway by being here. At least this way, we have leverage." Her expression was fierce. "We give this to your people with one condition. They let us walk away. No pursuit, no retaliation, complete immunity. They get the intelligence coup of the decade, and we get our freedom." It was brilliant. It was also incredibly dangerous. They'd be trusting MI6 to honor a deal when they had no leverage beyond the threat of destroying the intelligence. "It's risky," James said. "Everything about this is risky. But it's a better chance than running blind." Katya gripped his hand. "What do you say? One last operation. This time, working together instead of against each other." James looked at this woman who'd been his enemy, his mission, his lover, and now his partner in treason. She'd risked everything to be here. The least he could do was trust her completely. "Let's make the call," he said. The meeting took place in a secure MI6 facility on the outskirts of London. James and Katya sat on one side of a conference table, facing Victoria, the section chief, and two people James didn't recognize but assumed were very senior leadership. "You're both traitors," Victoria said flatly. "We should arrest you right now." "You could," James agreed. "But then you'd never know what's on this drive." He slid the flash drive across the table. "And I think once you see the contents, you'll agree that arrest would be ... counterproductive." The technical officer they'd brought examined the drive, carefully checking for malware, assessing the data. As files appeared on screens around the room, James watched expressions change from hostile to shocked to calculating. "This is ... double quotes," the section chief trailed off. "This is everything. Complete intelligence on Russian operations across Europe, not just operations," Katya said, her voice steady despite the tension. "Personnel files, including deep cover agents you've never identified. Communication protocols, funding streams, everything I had access to over 5 years of service." "Why?" Victoria's question was directed at Katya. "Why betray your country like this?" "Because my country was willing to sacrifice me for a mission that no longer mattered to me. Because I'm tired of being a tool. Because I fell in love, and love turned out to be stronger than loyalty to an organization that would discard me the moment I became inconvenient." Katya's gaze was unflinching. "I'm not proud of betraying my colleagues, but I'm done being loyal to a system that views people as disposable. And you," the section chief turned to James, "you threw away an exemplary career for this woman. Was she worth it?" James looked at Katya, this brilliant, fierce, complicated woman who'd chosen him despite every logical reason not to. "Absolutely," the senior leadership conferred quietly. Finally, one of the unknowns spoke. "Here's what we're prepared to offer. You give us complete access to Sokolova's knowledgeful debriefing on all Russian intelligence operations she's aware of. In exchange, you both get new identities, financial support to establish new lives, and are guaranteed that neither British nor Russian intelligence will pursue you." "How can you guarantee the Russians won't come after us?" Katya asked. "Because we'll let them know, through carefully managed channels, that pursuing you would result in the public release of compromising intelligence on their operations. Mutually assured destruction. Intelligence style. The official smiled thinly. It's not perfect, but it's the best protection we can offer. James and Katya exchanged glances. It wasn't perfect, they'd be looking over their shoulders for years, never completely sure they were safe, but it was a chance. We want one more thing, James said. No attempt to turn either of us back into assets. No pressure to return to fieldwork. We're done with intelligence operations. Completely and finally done. Agreed. The official said immediately. You're both too compromised to ever operate effectively again anyway. Consider yourselves retired. Then we have a deal, Katya said. The debriefing took 3 weeks. Katya provided exhaustive intelligence on Russian operations, burning her former colleagues with the same efficiency she'd once used to protect them. It clearly pained her. Jim saw the guilt and grief in her eyes every day, but she never wavered. When it was finally over, they were given new documents, new names, and enough money to start fresh somewhere far from London. Where do we go? Katya asked as they prepared to leave England forever. Somewhere warm, James suggested. Somewhere we can be anonymous. Somewhere we can figure out who we are when we're not spies anymore. That's going to be an interesting journey. The best journeys usually are. The coastal town in Portugal was exactly what they'd needed, small enough to be overlooked, large enough to have the amenities of modern life, beautiful enough to make exile feel like choice rather than punishment. James now called Thomas ran a small bookshop that catered to English-speaking tourists and locals learning the language. It was quiet, peaceful, and about as far from intelligence work as possible. Katya now Alana taught music at a local school and gave private piano lessons. She'd never mentioned her musical training during her time as a SVR officer, but James learned she'd been a serious pianist before joining intelligence. Watching her teach children, seeing her joy when they mastered a difficult piece, he saw a version of her that the SVR had tried to suppress. They were happy, not without complications. Boff still had nightmares. Both occasionally looked over their shoulders, expecting pursuers who never came. But they were building something real from the ruins of their former lives. Do you regret it? Katya asked one evening as they sat on their terrace overlooking the ocean. Everything you gave up to be here. James considered the question. He'd been thinking about it a lot lately, the career he'd destroyed, the identity he'd abandoned, the life he'd walked away from. No, he said finally. I regret the people who got hurt because of the choices we made. I regret that our freedom came at the cost of others' security. But choosing you, choosing this life, I'd make that choice again every time. Even knowing how complicated it would be. Especially knowing how complicated it would be. Because complicated and real is better than simple and false. He pulled her closer. What about you? Regrets? Only that I didn't meet you sooner. That I spent so many years being someone I wasn't. Serving something that didn't value who I really was. She smiled. But I suppose if I'd met you sooner, neither of us would have been ready to choose each other over everything else. Timing is everything, as is trust. Katya turned to face him. I trusted you with my life, with my freedom, with my future, and you never betrayed that trust. That's worth more than any career or identity. James kissed her as the sun set over the Atlantic, painting the sky in impossible colors. Somewhere, intelligence officers on both sides were still playing their games, still manipulating people, still treating human beings as tools to be used and discarded. But James and Katya were done with that world. They'd chosen each other, chosen honesty over deception, chosen love over loyalty to organizations that had never loved them back. They'd broken the code, not a cipher or encryption, but the fundamental code that governed their former world. The code that said mission came before person, country before conscience, duty before desire, and in breaking it, they'd found something neither had expected: freedom. I love you, James said as the last light faded from the sky. I love you too, Katya replied. My spy who couldn't lie to me, your spy who chose truth when it mattered most. They sat together in the gathering darkness, two former enemies who'd found something more powerful than any intelligence operation, a reason to stop fighting, and in the end, that was the greatest mission success of all. This story explores the tension between duty and desire, between the identities we're assigned and the people we choose to become. James and Katya begin as operatives following orders, viewing each other as missions to complete, but genuine connection has a way of destroying even the most carefully constructed cover stories. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose our own happiness over imposed loyalty, choose truth over comfortable deception, and choose to be fully human rather than perfectly useful. Love, in this context, becomes not manipulation but liberation, the force that breaks us free from the roles we've been playing and allows us to become who we really are.